You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome again to another show. Again, we're coming on a half hour later. Thanks for your patience. Of course, if you're watching this after the fact, it doesn't really matter. So that's all I'm going to say about it. But I did want to apologize to the people that are actually watching us live. Because, I know how that is. But we got it all worked out, so we should be good. But speaking of technical issues, Lucasfilm.
Nice segue.
They're kind of one big technical issue, and what's really interesting is that Tony Gilroy, who is I know he's the writer and the director of Andor. I assume he's the showrunner as well. He's actually come out and said some things about the other Star Wars shows and how he plans to set Andor apart as we're coming up on season 2 in like a month. Right? It comes out like April 22nd, I think.
Yep, April 22nd.
All right, well, what do you got?
Yeah, so Tony Gilroy, who did Rogue One, and he's also done, of course, season 1 of Andor. So he's talking about season 2 and the pressure that kind of comes with doing season 2. And he's comparing it to some of the other shows, because I guess people are kind of wondering, like, with all the other Star Wars shows not doing, too well, how do you feel, and is there any pressure for him? And so during a live interview, and several cast members from Andor season 1, they posted on Star Wars official YouTube page. And Gilroy spoke about the need to stick the landing, and he seemed to criticize what Star Wars TV shows have done before. Although he worded the statement carefully, Gilroy said, "We feel like, oh my God, we better not get confident. We better not be smoking our own ish here. We better really, holy crap, we better put the bar down here, and if we put the bar down here, we're gonna get crushed if we don't deliver." We're going to really, and we've seen, and we know, you all have seen all the other shows. You see other shows where people had trouble sticking the landing, and you're like, oh my God, we have to, so there's a new pressure. There's a new pressure, and there's also, do you have pride of what you did before, and you have a system that works?
That's important.
Yeah.
Just to interject here for a second. Having a system that works, to me, is probably at least half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the problem that I think Lucasfilm in doing a lot of these TV shows. Because remember, when we were talking about this before, we talked about the fact that the Star Wars TV universe has suffered quite a bit, because I still don't think that Lucasfilm fully understands how to do Star Wars on television. They've had some hits, they've had quite a few misses, they've had some good moments, even in bad projects, and then, of course, they've had really bad moments in a lot of these projects. And it's because Star Wars was really born to be a theatrical experience. And even though I'm fully on board with them doing it on television, I think that, honestly, that's where it probably needs to live, because you have so many stories that you can tell that, other than pumping out the books, and everybody has said, look, we like the fact that we get all these extra stories, right? That's why the expanded universe did so well. And the novels in the new canon continue to this day. So, honestly, I think that we don't want to necessarily wait a year or two for a new film, and you're only getting one story when there's so many things to tell. Of course, we're fine waiting for that movie, though, for a quality standpoint. But television is a really good medium for Star Wars to live, because you can get a little bit deeper into the stories, but then also you can tell more stories more frequently. So I think that, at least so far from what he said, he's on the right track. Do you have any initial thoughts as far as what you've read so far? Because again,
Well, yeah,
I don't want to just sit here and like read this stuff to everybody. We should, they can read it. We can send them a link to read it. It's really more just giving,
the sticking point, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Like what exactly this whole thing is saying, because really this is huge.
Well, it's good that one, he acknowledges that the other, even though he tried to clean it up, a little bit, while he's saying like other shows instead of all the other shows, so. But let's just face it, I think I like the fact that he's aware that these other shows have problems. And he realizes that he's also in that same sandbox. But he doesn't want to be lumped in with the rest of everyone else. He wants to, make sure that his show delivers exactly what he wants. And he's aware that like there's going to be some criticism. There's always going to be criticism about certain things. That's just the nature of the business, right? But the overarching point of it all is like, okay, did we tell a good story, a good, concise story? And did we develop these characters in a way that one serves that story and delivers on what we have been building up? And I think when you have that, and that's just a broad synopsis of what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with him. I really do. I think that one of the things that he has to be mindful of is that and I see that is that he knows that the fan base is fractured severely, and it's essentially hanging on by a thread.
Yes.
And he's just like, okay, he's feeling that pressure of like, I hope we really stuck it, the way that we planned. But, it's, I think we built upon what we already, we didn't deviate from what happened last time, essentially. It's just now, once again, you just hope everything just plays well and the fans see that.
Well, here's the thing, and I think this is important. First of all, this is the first time we're hearing any of these creators talk about this or talk like this and acknowledging the failures of some of these other shows. That's been one of my big criticisms of Lucasfilm, actually. It's not just that they're making these mistakes. It's the fact that they're pretending like everything's okay. And it's not okay. Now, what's ironic about this to me is the fact that the guy that's saying all this is the guy that's actually had the one, other than maybe the first couple of seasons of The Mandalorian, he's the one that's had the successful show. Like, everybody loves Andor, well, except for David. But, I mean, everybody loves Andor. It's almost like everybody hates Chris.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody agrees. Critics love it, say it's a great quality series. Same thing with the fan base. It really landed with everybody. So it's interesting to me. Now, of course, we have a chat. Ted says, hey, guys, glad you all overcame the technical issues for the show tonight. Yeah, we are, too, because, this time it was audio, right? I mean, who knew? I mean, it was just like one little thing, and we were able to fix it, and, here we are. But, yeah, I mean, I just think that when you're dealing with a person like Tony, because remember, he was not a fan of Star Wars coming in. He's the guy that basically was just doing it, and he's not necessarily a previous fan, and he's putting his spin on it, and that's the successful one.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that, people have to constantly remember is that not only did he have the best show so far, but he also had the best movie, so probably one of the best movies so far since Disney took over in Rogue One.
Well, and here's the thing that's interesting about that, right? Because Gareth Edwards is really the main director of that movie, but you're right. Gilroy came in when they did all those reshoots, and he's the one who essentially probably saved it. Like, I would be willing to bet, just looking at the way Andor is, that this is probably, like, all the good stuff about Rogue One has his stamp all over it.
Yeah, like that. Even that. So speaking of Rogue One, that final scene, well, I don't want to say pretty much final scene that we saw when Vader just, wreaks havoc upon everyone. That scene was initially supposed to be on the beach. And if you recall, when we looked at those trailers, we kind of saw that that's where it was heading because we saw his cape in the water as he was walking.
That's right.
So that
I forgot
whole
about
thing
that.
was supposed to be on the beach. Because I remember seeing it because he was being flanked by all those storm and death troopers. I was like,
That's
holy
right.
Yeah. And I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, like I couldn't wait to see that part.
Well, to be fair, there was a lot of things that, in the trailer that should have
Of
been
course,
there, right?
yeah, like that TIE fighter popping up out,
Oh,
man.
that's another glorious shot. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my goodness, yes. But, or however, we should try to see if we can find those on YouTube one day and just watch it again, see if they have it, because just to see those again.
Oh, you mean
But anyway.
actually punch up the Rogue One trailer?
Yeah, the Rogue One trailer, the original ones.
Yeah, we should even do that on the air. I mean, not like right now, but
Not right, yeah, right now.
But yeah, like maybe the next time we're talking about it or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'd be
But-
all for that.
The thing is, though, is that when you look at it, it's one of those things where, the decisions to be made. It's like, okay, let's have him here. Let's have that skirmish, happen in an enclosed area.
Well, wait, was Gilroy the one that basically was that his scene? I'm
Yeah,
trying
I
to
believe so.
remember. I think you're right, but I don't. If anybody else knows, we got a gang of people watching us tonight. Actually, let us know in the chat. Because I'm a little fuzzy on what part was Gareth Edwards and what part was Gilroy. But I think you're right. I think that whole scene actually was all
I think
him.
initially it was Gareth Edwards with the beachfront scene. And then when Gilroy punched up, when they had to do a bunch of reshoots, that was the one that he got into it and changed it to make it almost like a horror type thing.
And it was. I mean, that was totally like the whole Star Wars stalker, slasher film type of thing.
Yeah, it's like it might as well have been Michael Myers been over
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
Like Michael Myers with a lightsaber. And
Yes.
that's,
But I mean, that's the kind of thing. But see, that's the nuance that
Exactly,
you get
it's
with
those
somebody
little
like him.
tweaks.
Right. It's somebody that understands not just the franchise, because we always talk about that, right? We're always saying you got to get somebody in there that understands the franchise, stuff like that. That's why we like Dave Filoni so much, even though he's had some misses too. But I think the main element, though, right, like the most important thing here is the fact that when you have somebody from the outside who is a good filmmaker, they could bring that, and they're not so much doing a tribute to the franchise. I think that's where sometimes people get a little bit lost. I mean, do you think that that's the case too, that sometimes maybe people are trying to be a little bit too much like fanboying and giving fan service? Or
Yeah, I think there's two main problems that I've seen thus far when it comes to the direction of certain things. One, yes, it's too much fan service without purpose. I don't mind
Yes.
fan service,
no, fan
but if
service
I feel
is
like you
good.
just throw it in there,
Right,
it's
right.
and it has no reason, and it doesn't really okay.
It's like,
that
look, a medical droid. Remember the medical droids from Empire Strikes? Right, exactly. Like you're just
Exactly.
Well, actually, which show was that? Was that Book of Boba Fett? There was one where they just, I think it was in like the cantina or whatever, where they just threw like some complete fan service thing, and it was just so obvious that's what it was. And I remember you and I are like, really?
Ugh, right, exactly. The eye
Like
roll.
it actually had the opposite effect.
Yeah, because it's like you're pandering, and that's
Yeah.
we don't need that. We just need good storytelling, and if that's what's necessary to tell the story, but everything doesn't have to be connected. I remember there was a time where, and this bothered me, where everybody was trying to take certain things and make them dark and gritty.
Oh yeah.
And they were doing everything from, movies like Power Rangers, for example. Like, I remember they tried to make Power Rangers like these kids were like all these troubled, deviant kids. And it was just really stupid. It's just like, okay, it's so against the lore of the show, and then you have um, what was it, Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Now that actually kind of worked, and I thought that was kind of cool that they kind of urbanized it a little bit.
Yeah, that was. I was gonna say that was one where I think it actually kind of worked. I think
It kind of worked. I mean, I kind of like how they made it a drama. However, it still was like, okay, it's still kind of unnecessary though. It's like the show was fine. Or when they took 21 Jump Street and made it a comedy when it was originally a drama. You know, that like when they try to flip things on its head like that. So sometimes when they do things like that, I feel like they're trying to do too much. And I think that's in the name of being different. And let's try to just go all out and just completely turn things on its head. Where it doesn't seem like it will be a natural progression or a natural thing. And that's the part that
And I think
bothers
that's what bothers people. That's the thing that when people look at stuff like that, they think like why do that? Right?
Exactly.
Like why would you go in and mess something up like that? There's really no reason to do it other than you're just trying to be different, you're trying to be cool somehow. I mean, I don't know. I actually don't understand what the problem is. You know, why do people feel that? Because here's the problem. All it does is just have the opposite effect. People see right through it. And I'll tell you something else. It's a little, how do I want to put this? It's a little insulting to the audience.
exactly.
I think
No,
that
100%.
you're pandering, right? Like you said,
Mhm.
you're pandering
Yep.
to the audience, and I think the audience can see right through that.
Yeah, and it's also like, for example, Kylo. Like Kylo Ren, like the whole cross guard thing for a lightsaber. I get that you're trying to be innovative and be cool, and but it's stupid.
I don't know. I kind of like that though.
I didn't really care for that. Like I just,
I mean, well, so here's the thing, and I get it. It's almost like they're taking a design, and you're like, why? I don't get it. I mean, the in-universe explanation for that was actually pretty cool. It was because it was so unstable, and the crystal he was using or whatever was so like out there that they had to vent it. He actually, it wasn't so much that was a cross guard, although that is pretty much the effect that it had. And somewhere, some in the boardroom or whatever, they're like, ooh, it'd be cool. Let's make a lightsaber with a cross guard.
yeah,
But
make it look like a real the
Right.
Knights of Ren. It looks
Yeah.
like a knight's sword. I mean, I know what they were going for.
Exactly. And I know that's the case, but what they did, and look, Star Wars are really good at doing this. They're good at taking something that's really stupid and then giving an in-universe explanation for it where you're like, oh, actually, that's sort of cool and that makes sense. Because the idea is, much like Kylo himself, his lightsaber was so unstable and pretty much like at the brink of blowing up that they had to create like these vents in order to vent the energy out. So when you see the blade coming out, it's really venting, not acting as a
Yeah.
crossguard. Although I mean, I guess that's sort of the effect it has, but
Yeah.
that's what
Now,
they did.
yeah. Now, to me, I would have thought it would have been better if you would have just had him as a traditional lightsaber, maybe give him a cool looking hilt or whatnot. But I like the fact that his lightsaber wasn't solid; it was frayed, it was fringed or
Yes.
frayed.
Yeah.
See, that to me is cool because if you want to portray like, okay, he's unhinged, I like that because it gives it personality. It's like, okay, because that's part of why you have to pick a crystal is because not only does it power your lightsaber, but it's a part of you. It's literally like there's a connection that you have with it. So if you're unhinged, it's going to be unhinged. And so it's going to represent that. See, to me, that's how you tell the story. Don't give it some stupid, I mean, don't get me wrong, the explanation is cool, but you didn't even get that in the movie. So it's like,
No,
it's still,
I know. Well,
so
again,
now it's
that's-
still like we're back at the point where it just looks stupid. See, if you gave me, like Luke was fighting him and saw his lightsaber, it's like, I taught you better than this. What is this? If he was kind of critiquing his lightsaber and he was like, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you're not focused. This is why your lightsaber is venting like this because you're not focused. See, if you'd have put that in a story, I can buy it and I can get with it. But when you just have it out there and it's just stupid.
Here's the thing, though.
I can't.
No, you're absolutely right, because remember, these are the same people that gave us Palpatine's return, and where did we find out really a lot of details? Fortnite. And then, of course, some other, like, I don't know, like some of the Star Wars, either the novelizations or, some of the stuff like that, right? It's kind of like, it was a rule that you and I talked about a long time ago on this show. We said, look, if you're going to have something in the film, you have to explain it in the film. Mm-hmm. You can't count on some supplementary piece of media to give you the explanation, because now your audience isn't going to be invested in it. And somebody, again, like Tony Gilroy, understands that. See, I think that this is where he's taking a lot of these things. If you look at Andor season 1, the fact that we all know that Star Wars is trilogies. It's a trilogy-based franchise. So what does he do? He makes trilogies of episodes, 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, and so on and so on.
Right.
He's thinking in terms of this. He's telling a story like that. The stuff in the universe actually makes sense. Now, granted, Andor was meant to be more grounded anyway because it's dealing more with the war and not the lore, but still, you look at some of the filmmaking decisions that he's made, and you don't get the sloppiness that you got in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's what I mean, just having the thought. And this is what I mean by, like, going for the first down and not trying to go for the, Hail Mary touchdown all the time. It's just like you make those little subtle adjustments. Like I said about the lightsaber, like, okay, you want to show something different in Star Wars, show the lightsaber frayed, or like almost like there's it's a live wire almost. And
yeah,
because that's how Kylo is. He's erratic. He's super powerful, but he's unstable. And because you've never seen, I mean, that's one of the cool things I loved, is that we've never seen the character like that before, not on the Sith side.
Right.
Like everybody's been super poised, like even Palpatine is poised, Vader is poised for the most part, like he really doesn't get too out of character. Maul, again, very poised. He knows what he's doing. Dooku is the personification of poise. I mean, he's like Shakespeare up there with a lightsaber.
He's like the most regal,
Yeah, more regal and defined and polished. Yep. And you can tell by his lightsaber, it's curved. It's more of a fencing thing. That's what I'm saying. Like, it made sense. And that's what I mean. Like,
well, I'll tell you something else. Like Leia's lightsaber. I thought her lightsaber was awesome. It's like, man, sweet. I wish we could have seen more of that, right? But I mean, the problem is, again, it's not even like, if that in-universe explanation for Kylo's lightsaber had been written in, and like you said, had actually been articulated somehow in the film,
at least it would be like, okay,
yeah, even
I buy it. I have to buy it now because you gave it to me. You know what I mean? Like, this is what you presented to me. It's like, and as long as it has, it makes sense. So Luke looked at the lightsaber and it's like, it fell out Kylo's hand and Luke picked it up and it's like, this is some terrible craftsmanship. Like, I taught you better than this.
It's like, really, what is
like, why would you do this? Like this, you have these circuits here. I mean, I trained you better than this. And, he's just like, I don't have to do things your way. I wanted to make my own. He's like, well, your own is unstable, Kylo. Look at this. I mean, the crystal's unstable. Right. It's venting all over the place.
You're rushing through it, that kind of thing.
You rush through it. Yeah, there's no finesse. There's no polish to it. It's just, it's just like you were just angry one day. He's like, well, I am angry. See, if you put that into a context.
I know, already you're writing a scene that I wish had been in the movie.
Exactly. That's what
or
I'm saying.
Or even in a novel. I would have taken it in the novelization. But see, again, when Tony Gilroy is calling this stuff out, he did not call out I should probably point this out. He didn't call out the sequel trilogy specifically. I think
he didn't call out any of them at all.
Well, not but I'm talking about like TV versus movies. He's stuck with TV shows, right? He didn't. Yeah, he didn't.
That's what you're saying.
I know he wasn't over there going, well, the Acolyte was poorly written. I don't want to, I want to avoid that or whatever. But he was basically talking about on a grander scale, avoiding the pitfalls of pretty much Disney-era Star Wars, except for the stuff he's been involved in. And what's ironic about his statement and all the other statements he made in this interview is the fact that he's the one that's acutely aware of, oh man, there's a lot of pressure. I better make sure I get this right, and on and on it goes. It's like the ironic thing is, dude, you're the one guy doing this right.
Well, yeah, but see, like you pointed out earlier, Eric, that Mandalorian was doing well too.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's why he says you got to stick the landing, because a lot of times, and that's another good point. While we're here, is that sometimes you start off well. It's like, man, you're doing all the right stuff. It's like cool, and then like that's why Tony Gilroy said you got to stick the landing. Because you'll watch gymnastics, right? They'll do all these things, and then at the very end, it's like, ooh, it was almost perfect. They didn't stick the landing, and that's what he's trying to avoid. He wants it to be a complete masterpiece, so where he can say like, okay, I'm done with it. I can walk away with it with no regrets, and everyone, for the most part, can pretty much say this was a good series. And I think that's his mentality, and I applaud him for that, because and that's why he said we can't get confident, we can't get comfortable in resting on the laurels of season 1.
Well, and again, this is what I think is very important: the fact that he recognizes all of this stuff. I can't stress this enough. I mean, I think that one of the things is he already has the tools to pull this off correctly. We've seen that already in season 1. We also see just by the things that he's saying, he's thinking on a different level than a lot of these other filmmakers. You look at Leslie Headland's attitude when she was making The Acolyte, very different. Very different. And I think that one of the reasons why Gilroy, besides, of course, his pedigree as a filmmaker, as a showrunner, all that stuff, I think the main thing that's going to make the difference here is the fact that, like you said, he is aware. He understands. I think, in a way, he actually understands more about what the fan base wants than a lot of these Star Wars fans that have grown up with it since, the 70s that are making the movies now.
Yeah, I think with the difference between, Tony Gilroy and Leslie Headland, if you spent less time trying to make a point,
yeah,
and actually make a story,
yeah,
you might do something, and well, that's the thing. It's like you're trying to fight this whole agenda thing, and it's like, see, get rid of that, almost like Kylo again. Let it go, and just make a good story. Make things just like, okay, this is a great arc. This is, and like I said, we didn't know who to root for in Acolyte. We didn't know who to.
There were a lot of problems.
There was just so many things.
The writing was the main thing. But again, and I can't help but bring this up because obviously we focus. There's actually less of a quote-unquote agenda than I thought there would be based on some of the interviews that we had heard before.
We saw.
Yeah. I was actually pleasantly surprised by that.
Me too.
But here's the thing that I think hurt the series more than it goes in with the bad writing. But we were promised a very different series than what we got.
Absolutely.
When they were hyping this up for a year, maybe more, the direction that they gave us, at least the impression that we all had, very different from what it turned out to be. And I think that one of the things that Gilroy is acutely aware of when he's saying, look, we're going to stay the course and everything else, it's what that is indicating to me is like, look, all the things you loved about Andor season 1, yeah, they're still here. Right?
Yeah.
Still here, still what we're doing, but we're going to add some more things. And honestly, I think just based on the trailers and, of course, everything that we know, it's obviously we're going to get a lot bigger time jumps. We already know that.
Yep.
We know that it's going to bump up against Rogue One. We know that it's going to feature a lot more people from Rogue One, and it's going to really talk about Andor's development as a rebel soldier, spy, whatever. And I think that it's going to be handled well, but it really does make me feel better that, he understands all this, that he's thinking along those lines. Because again, I think that Lucasfilm would be so much better off if these people would just step back for a second and take stock and say, okay, well, what went wrong? Instead, what did you get? You got Headland and everybody when the Acolyte failed. They're out there blaming the fans. Oh, you're too toxic. You're bigots. You're racist. You're whatever. You don't like women in the lead or something. I mean, it was like they were throwing everything. Like all the actors are sitting there, like everybody's like trying to beat up the fans. And like you pointed out, all the fans want is a good story. We'll be on board for virtually anything. Just make it, really good.
Well, that's the thing, because we set the market.
Yes.
And that's the thing that they have to understand is we set the tone in the market for Star Wars, because what you give us is, I mean, if we're not buying it, we're not buying it. See, the thing is, when you look at Andor, and this is one of the brilliant things I love about Tony Gilroy, is that, okay, season 1, although it had its slow moments,
it
and
did.
This is what we were trying to explain to David and maybe others, is that you're trying to build the characters, because for such a time as this, because in season 2 you're going to be doing a whole lot of time jumping. So if you already know who these characters are and what they bring and the personality and the depth of them, so now when you start time jumping, it's like, okay, it's easier to take on the icing on the cake, because the cake has been built in season 1.
Right.
So now when you adding K2SO in this relationship, it's like, okay, we don't have to try to explain K2SO and Andor, and that was part of the problem. You and I talked about this with the Batman series, is that after a while they start trying to introduce too many villains in one movie without enough development, that you started losing things. So when in the first 89 Batman, you had just Batman and the Joker, and you saw how their lives were symbiotic with each other, as far as they need each other in a way, because they one created the other. So, okay, I get that. And that was flawlessly done by, Tim Burton. Okay, well, Batman Returns, you had Catwoman and Penguin. Fortunately, they were able to master both of their origin stories, but Batman's story has already been laid, so you don't have to focus on him anymore. Now you just have to focus on the villain story and then how Batman has to stop them. Again, because the foundation was laid in 89. But then when Tim Burton got out of it, and now you start bringing in like Two-Face and Riddler and like all these other people, and they start trying to bring in Bane, and it just got convoluted, and it's just like, okay, where's the story in this? And that's what was missing. And so that's what happens in Star Wars right now, is that now we have a situation where Tony Gilroy has laid out the characters. We know who to root for. We know we're rooting for Andor. We know, after the prison breakout, I mean, that was just as David likes to say, beat your chest moment. Even Andy Serkis's, conversion in that was really awesome.
Well, honestly, the whole prison story arc was probably, it was probably my favorite of the series, honestly, because
that and the speech that his mom gave.
Well, yeah, and I mean
that whole battle, like right before they went to battle, that was awesome.
That was incredible. I mean, I like the payoff eventually of that heist that they were doing, although I have to admit the lead up to it I thought was taking a little too long. It's like, okay,
it was taking a bit of time.
Yeah, they were taking a little too much time with that. It's like, okay, maybe we could have gotten there earlier.
I agree, but in the interim and looking back, what they were doing, at least what I want to believe that they were doing, was we got really more detail on Cyril and Deidre and those characters.
Yes. Well, and Bix also played a big role in some of the, some of that as well. And of course, don't forget Luthen and Mothma.
Yeah.
Right? I
mean, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have all these characters that you had to kind of like spotlight in a way. Almost like what we saw with,
too.
Yeah, and flesh out. That's what I'm saying. Like much like what we saw with Skeleton Crew, where each character sometimes had their own episode. Like there was an episode that was clearly Neil's. Then there was some where it was like, okay, this is KP's story. This is when she gets to explain to her, what's the boy's name now?
Wim.
Wim. Yeah, she gets to explain to Wim like, okay, her cybernetics, and he wants to be the hero, and so he helps save her life, and he kind of did it. She kind of did it on purpose to kind of restore his confidence, and all those different things. So it's like, okay, you're building these characters up, so that now when you come to the climax, it's like, all right, we know who's good at doing what now,
right?
And
because, like you said, they've given these characters depth, and that's the. Yes. But the thing is, you do bring up a good point. I mean, they had a lot of people they had to develop in season 1. I mean, when you just stop and think back of just everything. And again, but see, they made the smart decision of doing 12 episodes.
That too.
That's the biggest issue.
It's
right. It's like, okay, you make Obi-Wan, like 6 episodes. Yeah, you're going to have to rush through some things. And maybe that's not the best way to do it. I mean, I understand kind of what they're doing. They're trying to streamline things so they're not dragging things out. But it's like, look, if you're coming up with some of these series that are based on specific classic characters, especially, you got to take the time. You do. I mean, the 8-episode thing I think might be the sweet spot for a lot of these Star Wars shows, and that there is a tendency of that's where they land, right? About 8 episodes. But given everything that they were doing with Andor, plus they're doing a little bit of world building too, don't forget that. So I think it was wise for them to do 12 in that one.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things that you really have to consider. It's like, what's realistically, how long should I, is it going to take for me to tell this story properly? Keyword is properly. Because, it's like, oh, can we tell it in 8? Yeah, we could. However, it's going to taint or it's going to mar or muck up like what we're trying to build here, because there's a lot of character development that's not going to be seen, and now we're going to have to try to infer it a lot, and there's some things could be lost. Whereas if we actually have time to slow it down and get in deep with it now, because the payoff, like I said, with with season 2, which is another 12, all right? So now we're getting trilogies now, like you said, and I think now he's once again telling concise stories within this frame of a 3-episode arc, where it's like, okay, here's how this, and then we could time jump here. But because you've established a lot of these characters already, now when we see Deidre, now when we see Bix, now when we see Luthen, and all, like it all makes sense. It's like, okay, now we can kind of just rock and roll. We don't have to do.
He did say
something you always brought up, Aaron. I'm sorry to cut you off, but something you always brought up that I always thought was really poignant. It was that, why do we, in every iteration of a superhero, do we have to get the origin story? Like, we already know how Spider-Man became Spider. Like, we've seen it 12 times already. Like, let's just get to him being Spider-Man at this point. All right. And I think sometimes that's what we need to do. We don't have to do that with season 2. We could just get straight to, okay, here we are. What's the mission? And what's the overall, now we have to get him to meet K2SO. Now we have to get him to, to join the rebellion, or for the rebellion to finally form. So, yeah.
Well, it's a connective tissue. I mean, what you're bringing up is exactly what they needed to do, right? Because whereas season 1 was more about world building, it was more about character development, that kind of thing. Putting us in the story, like, well, where are we in the Star Wars universe at this point? It's a very big part, right? But then now season 2 has to focus on the connective tissue to Rogue One. How do we get Andor from where we leave him in season 1 to what he eventually becomes in Rogue One? And I think that's going to be the main driving force behind what season 2 is. But again, and I go back to this partially because it's what our thumbnail said this topic was about. is the fact that Tony Gilroy is so acutely aware of the missteps that a lot of the other TV shows made, I think is going to pretty much guarantee. I mean, like I say, he's the guy that got it right. So, I mean, just based on Andor season 1, I remember we did a show not too long ago where we were talking about, well, are we looking forward to season 2? And I'm like, well, based on the quality of season 1, I'm not really that worried about season 2, whereas that's not really true from season to season with some of these other shows. Now, granted, a lot of them didn't even get a second season. But for those that did, okay, Mandalorian season 2, that was cool, but I was confident going into season 3, and then it became what it became. Okay, and then after that, then what you ran into was a situation like Ahsoka, where there was a lot of mistakes in Ahsoka. I don't think it's unsalvageable by any stretch.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like there's enough missteps in Ahsoka that you're like, I don't know if season 2 is really going to be that good or not. But Andor I was never worried about. But again, none of these other showrunners have that same kind of self-reflection and just pretty much unbiased, look, I can admit the mistakes that were made. I mean, granted, he could do that because he didn't make them. But it's nice that, that could be put out there. I think that that's an important thing. Now, here's the question, though. And, of course, our audience can jump in on this. It's been great. Like I said, we've had a lot of people watching tonight. So that's encouraging. Maybe we should go on this late all the time. It's like we're having the most people ever watching us right now live. So, I don't know. It might be something to be said. But given that season 2 is going to be the thing that's going to connect us to Rogue One, and given that Gilroy is pretty much aware of the failures of a lot of the other Star Wars shows, how do you think that that's going to frame season 2? Like, what do you expect now from season 2, given these revelations?
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be one of my next points I was going to actually address, is that...
Well, there you go. I teed it up for you.
There you go. Nice alley-oop off the backboard.
Yeah, good. Now I can sip a little drink here while you carry it for a minute.
Yeah, so one of the things I think that gives Tony Gilroy the advantage is, one, he understands the macro and the micro. So because he's done Rogue One already, right? He was a part of that, and he was on set. He was helping. Of course, he did some of the shots and things like that. And arguably, Rogue One is one of the best films that's come out of the Disney era. And now he's taken that down to a smaller screen in television. However, because he knows, and the thing is that he has an advantage because he knows how it has to end. With Acolyte, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, all those series didn't have necessarily a definitive end because they were just kind of like a spinoff, where this is more like a prequel to something we already know happened, that he was already a part of. So I think that kind of gives him the advantage, because now he doesn't have to figure out like I have to end it here. How do I just get to here and just make it make sense, right? Some of the things that I'm looking forward to from season 2, and I would love to get your input on this as well, is that
don't worry.
One of the things I loved about season 1, as we just discussed, was the character development. Like, I really felt a lot of, like, when we looked at some of the circumstances that our characters were placed in, I felt that as a viewer. Case in point, the situation of, okay, you have Mon Mothma, who's this dignitary that's trying to start a rebellion, and she realizes she has to do things in secret, so she has the stress of that alone. That alone is could get her killed, right? but then she has to move covertly through all of this, as we see when her navigating with Luthen and things like that. But then now she also has the added stress of her family, because her husband is one way, her child is doing this, and it's like, okay, she has to choose.
Yep.
And that's a vicarious position to be in, because, man, like, what would I do? Because most people,
I mean, that's sort of reflective of what happened in Nazi Germany, and then of course in other, periods of the time where you had, even in V, right? The sci-fi series V, which is based on the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, the visitors come, they start recruiting humans to be part of their little, police force or whatever. Well, now the parents are tiptoeing around the kid because the kid's all gung-ho about the visitors, but, they're kind of going, yeah, we've seen this before. I don't think this is going to end well. But you can't say that because your own kid might turn you in at this point.
mm-hmm.
And the stuff that's happening with Mon Mothma is the same way, right? Because obviously the daughter and the husband were a little bit more pro-Empire than she is, because she's seen the inner workings. And of course, the other thing that I loved, if I could segue into that a little bit, besides the stuff that you mentioned, I liked how they were showing the shell of what the Republic once was. They're going through the motions. You're still having the Senate meet, but it's not a bunch of senators. It's obvious that Palpatine is completely in control at this point, but he's keeping up the facade of the old Republic ways. I just thought that was really fascinating to see, because, again, it's something that you really don't get to see in too many shows anyway, or movies, right? It's usually like you're seeing the aftermath of whatever it is, or you're seeing the beginning. But this is like closer to the beginning of the end, which is why I love the time period between episode 3 and 4 so much. But here's the thing, though. A lot of times, and Rogue One is guilty of this, that's more toward the end of that period. Thing I love is kind of like the Bad Batch, Andor, where we're seeing the very beginnings of it,
Rebels.
Right, Rebels. Although Rebels is kind of in there too. Rebels actually doesn't take place too far from Rogue One. But you get the Bad Batch and you get, Andor. Now you're getting this whole, okay, Order 66 happened, Palpatine took over, the Empire is just beginning. What does it look like? What does that transitionary from the Republic? Like? Yeah. Yeah, because, here Palpatine was like the kindly guy that, was just trying to do things for the Republic, and, these wars broke out and on it goes. Well, now he doesn't have to pretend anymore. And you're seeing that he's amassing more and more power as time goes on, and he's seeing less of a need to actually pretend. It's like, you know what? I don't have to pretend. I could just be like, listen, guys, I'm basically in charge. You're all screwed. That's the end of it, right? But this is still the time where he still needs to gain the support of the galaxy, so he's keeping up appearances. And Mon Mothma and her family being the lens by which we see all this, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's just one half. But on the flip side of that, you see with Deidre, and she's trying to, assert herself, and so we get to see like a Empire board meeting, where everyone's talking about, okay, and this is the task for the week. We got to stop these insurgents from, doing this and blah blah blah. And oh, I thought you had that sector. Well, why are they running around just? How's this even, able to happen? We need answers. And, and so now she's trying to fight her own people. She's trying to establish herself. And most of us have been in spaces like that where you're at a job, you maybe want to advance and move up. And, there's other people out there who may not who want the same spot you want. And now it becomes competitive. And, okay, well, now you got to watch your back from your own people. But then on top of that, you're trying to form alliances with others like, Cyril, and, has this whole thing with Deidre, and he's trying to redeem himself because he's been kind of, dishonored, and because he led a bunch of, even that whole scene of Him trying to lead that whole
Oh man,
charge,
when
and he
when he
gave
tried to give
that speech.
that
Yeah, and they
horrible
was like, good,
speech.
good job, sir. It was like you got the butt kisser in there, just trying to, and he knows that everybody's kind of looking at him like, oh, this guy. So once again, like even those guys, like you felt it because you have that one guy at work or somebody you might work for or a company, and you're just like, who thinks they're the leader, and they're incompetent. And you're just like, oh my God, just shut up and just let us do our. So it's just that's what I loved about this whole series is that it humanizes everybody because everyone you can kind of almost relate to in some sort of way, shape, or form, whether it's on the Empire side or the budding rebellion.
Well, and here's the thing. You also had the middle because here's another thing that this series shown a little bit of light on that we rarely get to see, and that's the average citizen.
Yeah.
Because you were in that one town, the Empire was running it, and it was kind of like they had to deal with, what was it, like some water thing? It was like some city council meeting, basically, that they had to attend. And it was like you got to see, how the average person in the galaxy is living during this time, too. So you really see a big window here of different things that we've never seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people liked it because it was Star Wars, but not Star Wars in a way. Like it was because without the lightsabers and the Force and all of that, like okay, well, what is it as compelling?
Yeah.
That was the question. It's like, can you tell a Star Wars story without the magic, quote unquote? Can you do it without the Force? Can you do it without a lightsaber? And the answer is yes, if you know what you're doing. If you have the vision to really like, okay, what's happening and how do I relate this to people that anybody almost can understand what's going on here and can almost, in some cases, sympathize or, have empathy in these moments, right? And I think that's what Tony Gilroy really did, splendidly. And I think if he keeps that as at the forefront, season 2 is going to be awesome because I know, we're bringing back Alan Tudyk who played K2SO, which we'll get to see some more comedy, which is something that was kind of missing in that one, but it's fine because you're setting up the drama. I would love to see what Andy Serkis' character, because remember he survived,
right?
So I want to see how that comes to fruition. There's so much that I'm excited for season 2 of Andor. I know how it has to end, but how do we get there? That's the journey, and that's the question.
Well, and quite frankly, that's going to be the exciting part. And, obviously we're going to keep everybody up to date on all this stuff. I mean, even though we're not really a Star Wars news channel per se.
Right.
But, we are a discussion channel. So, I mean, we do discuss anything that pops up. I mean, and it's true, we haven't really hit the trailer. I know there was that second trailer that came out. We haven't always had the best of luck with trailers, though. Like, well, lately
Right.
actually it hasn't been so bad because we've been keeping the volume down, and I think the last one or two we've escaped any kind of, warnings or strikes or anything like that. But, those are always looming over our heads as we're doing this. But absolutely, there's a lot of things to look forward to when it comes to season 2. And again, I like the fact that you have somebody out there who is finally saying, there's been a lot of misses and there have been a lot of people putting pressure on us, rightly so, to get it right. And I think that maybe this is the beginning of a new era. We talked about how Kathleen Kennedy might be stepping down. Now, of course, she's walked back on that. At first, the rumor was she was going to step down at the end of the year. Now, she's going to bring somebody up and train them and sort of take a back seat. We don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm starting to see maybe there's a little bit of a change of attitude at Lucasfilm, and I really hope that it's a positive step forward. So, again, you guys, it was great. I mean, wow, lots of people tuning in tonight, like I said. Still, decent amount of people on, actually. So we actually thank you guys for sticking with us on a Sunday night, watching us live. I know a lot of you guys do watch after the fact and, throughout the week or whatever, but we're always appreciative of the people who, even if you don't chat in, who watch us live. Of course, I'm going to have to do the obligatory, please hit the like and subscribe button. We all know the YouTube algorithm likes it. You know what? We like getting likes. Everybody likes being liked.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, hey, whether it's a virtual thing or people chatting in saying, hey, there's been a lot of people that have commented and said, hey, glad, I just found your channel. I hit the subscribe button. It was great. Glad I found you. So hopefully there's a few of you guys out there as well. So yeah, we'll see. We may or may not have a show tomorrow. We don't know yet. But if we do, you know where to find us. So I think that's going to do it for tonight. Got anything else you want to add to this wonderful Andor discussion we've had, or are you good?
I'm all set, man.
All right, good of the order, because, Andor is all about procedural stuff and everything. Figured
Right.
mimic that a little bit, right? Make it like a Republic thing. All right, cool. Well, watch for us, like I said. Like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you guys will know the next time we go live. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next show. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.